Okay, so I've given people about 3 minutes to join. So let's start off. So welcome everyone to the UK Climate Projections webinar series, and glad you have made time today to come to this. So usually we have uh, co-chairs of the development and knowledge sharing network that we have to inform the UKCP Climate Service. But unfortunately, neither are available today. So you have me, so I'm Fai Fung. I work at the Met Office, and I lead the team that works on the UKCP Climate Service. So today we have a couple of speakers. It's slightly different to our kind of normal agenda, but hopefully you'll still find it interesting. I will introduce them, but first of all, I just wanted to talk about the process or what we're going to see today. So we're going to have both presentations following each other at the start. So that'll be for the first 40 minutes or so, and we'll have one Q&A right at the end. So you can post those questions, as you see in the slide, in a Q&A box. You see that up at the top ribbon of the Teams app that you've got. And please do upvote questions if you want them to be kind of prioritized. And I'll be chairing that a bit at the end. We will be meeting everyone during the meeting, but we will, if it's easier to kind of to voice those questions, then we will be doing that. As you might have seen at the start, the webinar is being recorded, and the webinar will be made available on YouTube not too long after the session today. If you are having technical difficulties, then please email us at that email address, and also use the chat function if that's available to you. And just one last thing to mention too. So at the moment we have speakers lined up for the autumn period, but we are asking others for you who've participated so far. Please do offer to present and volunteer to present what your experiences, because I think so far it seems to be the feedback is very positive. And if you feel like maybe that the experience that you have, maybe that you're a little bit kind of nervous about what to share, certainly have a chat with us. We're happy to help out and try and work out a program that would work for you. So please do get in touch. And I think it's really vital for that for ongoing this ongoing webinar series. So we're going to go to the first speaker now, and that's Denyse Doolie from the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, based at the LSE. And she is essentially kind of working mostly on kind of climate information use for adaptation, disaster risk reduction and resilience, and kind of works around the world, from the Caribbean to looking at adaptation in the UK, as well as sub-Saharan Africa. So without further ado, shall pass on to Denyse.
Thank you very much. Can I confirm that you can hear me and see my screen?
Yes, can see you and hear you.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and it's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation from the UKCP Science and Services team. My name is Denyse. I'm a research fellow at the Grantham Research Institute, and alongside colleagues Declan Conway at the Grantham as well, and Siraj Desai, University of Leeds, we've been working a lot on how organizations sort of view adaptation and how they use climate information for decision making. So in this presentation, I'm going to try to cram a lot into it, and I'll give a flavor of some of our key findings based on written papers, as well as writing that's in the work. Okay, so we started our focus on organizations simply because most of the research on adaptation is thinking about individual or public considerations of adaptation, but organizations are impacted by very differently by climate change. Compared to or individuals and public considerations, but they also impact climate change in terms of how they respond to and provide collective action on adaptation. Sorry about that. So it's really important to consider how organizations accept, react, or contribute to, or even care about the physical risks associated with climate change. And so this is what our presentation and our work in general tries to do. Just some overall insights. We looked at 2,429 respondents across 5 different organizational sectors in 4 UK nations. The climate change concern is there, but action is generally low. There are some barriers to adaptation, which include finance, lax attitudes, awareness, and knowledge. There's some confusion or conflation with respect to what adaptation is. So sometimes it may be considered as mitigation, and I'll provide some insights on that. But there's no one size fits all, and that's the entire purpose of doing something like this. And understanding differences across sectors and regions could help us attend to these needs better and also better target effective messaging of risk and climate information. So before I go into some of these high-level results, here's a summary of what the research or how we went about this research. And it really comes from this process of prepare. This is the program of research on preparedness, adaptation, and risk. And it was done twice before by DEFRA in 2009 and then 2012. We looked and said, wow, this is really rich. We'd love to learn more about what organizations are thinking about. And we were funded by different agencies in spring 2021. This was an online survey. It was conducted by a market research company. There were 54 closed and open-ended questions. We looked towards getting insights from 5 sectors, which included the private sector, public education, public health, local government authorities, as well as the third or charitable sector, and across all 4 UK nations. We targeted the questionnaire towards respondents based with a function or title in organizational planning. And a full sample, as I said, of over 2,400 organizational representatives were included. And the pie charts here include some of these details, and more can be found within our published papers already. So I'm going to just dive right into the insights. So what we found firstly was that flooding and heat waves are mostly considered as threats. These were the extreme events that are mostly considered or highly considered by organizations. And these 2 are really highlighted within the responses. So these were mainly experienced, the impacts were mostly negative and felt quickly, and they are of planning concern. When we asked organizations if you've been thinking about adaptation planning, many of them said, yes, we've begun to look at it. We're just getting started. But I want to highlight that 19% said they have not yet thought about adaptation planning, and 10% flat out said they won't, which is quite concerning for us. We asked them about their key barriers to adaptation, and as sort of expected, finance resources seem to take quite a high role. But there's also considerations regarding complacency or staff attitude toward climate change, difficulty identifying effective measures, and awareness of new technology, but also is not really considered a priority by many organizations. When asked about who should bear responsibility, national government is pretty high up in terms of bearing total responsibility, followed by the international community. And when we asked them, what should the government provide more of to help you? It said, really, I want to know more about the effects of climate change in the UK, how climate change is relevant to my kind of organizations, say what the effects of climate change will be, not what they might be. So really some considerations of certainty, scientific language, and so forth. There is also this question that I highlighted early on about the meaning of adaptation. What adaptation measures has your organization adopted or invested in? And when we did an analysis of this open-ended question, we found that about 26% gave a pure adaptation response, and about 34% gave a more mitigation-oriented response. So we find this sort of interesting to highlight, our organizations understanding what adaptation means, and does this affect their planning, of course. So that was the adaptation aspect. I wanted to share that with you because it was a big part of our research, and that has been previously published work. We now move on to insights relating to climate information. This work has not yet been published, so I really welcome your thoughts and feedback on this. So we asked organizations, do you have enough information? Do you feel like you have this information to make decisions regarding adaptation? about less than 15% across different sectors say yes, definitely. Most of them said yes, probably, but there's still a high degree of respondents that said no, probably not, or even definitely not. Where do organizations get information from to cope with this? Many people turn to colleagues, which we found was quite interesting. Insurance companies are next, followed by the Met Office and a generic government literature. CCRA is up here at the fifth spot in terms of where they get their information from. We then asked them, what's the frequency of use? How often do you use these different types of information? And the top 5 climate information sources that were always used, number 1 is internet searches. Next, government literature. Third is the Met Office, then colleagues, and then specifically Met Office, UKCP. So this was quite interesting in terms of what they tend to use more frequently. Now, in terms of ease of understanding, the top 5 sources that organizations consider to be very easy to use: colleagues, friends, internet searches, television, social media. These are easy sources of knowledge. What do they consider as difficult? Insurance companies, academic sources, company reports, UKCCRA, and environmental regulators. Now, when it comes to what they considered as reliable, academic sources, Met Office, international agencies, the CCRAs, and the UKCP are considered as very reliable. So when you look through these 3, the frequency of use, the ease of use, and reliability, we do see differences in terms of, well, what's easy and what's seen as very credible and trustworthy, which should be kept in mind as we think about mechanisms and actions moving forward. So then I turn to this aspect of, okay, I know the different sources. Let's try to categorize them in some way to really get some more depth. So we took all of these information sources. We categorized them: government, internet and media, academic, non-governmental sources, and word of mouth. And then what we did, and I hope you all can see this, I know it's a bit messy when you look at it up front, is to look at by sector how different government sources of climate information are viewed. So the adaptation committee knowledge seems to be the lowest appreciated across all aspects and sectors. The CCRA is seen as highly reliable, but not necessarily easy to use or frequently used. This generic government literature was viewed the highest in terms of frequency and ease of use. International agencies' data is seen as very reliable, especially by public health and education. But I will say to the Met Office, and I'm happy to say that Met Office general data was easily used by most sectors. How would you describe your knowledge of UKCP 18 specifically? So if you look at the light blue, which is at the top, this refers to, I know what it is and I have used it a lot. It's not that much. It's about 5% or less of organizations have heard about it and use it very frequently. There's about 10% on average that know what it is and have used it a little, but quite a high proportion. The purple bars that you see there have never heard of it or don't know what it is. The public health and private sectors are more aware of and use it compared to the other sectors, but a large degree of local authorities and charitable sectors are just not familiar with it. This is extremely messy. I do know this, but I wanted to highlight the richness of the data set and the results that we're finding and kind of showcase what we are able to sort of get information on. I look at the perceptions of UKCP 18 by private sector industries specifically. And what we find is that UKCP 18 is mostly seen as relevant to needs, especially for the agriculture, fish, forestry sector, as well as electricity. They're mostly seen by all sectors as trustworthy and scientifically credible, but there are challenges, as we found before, of ease of use, finding it and understanding it. The reasons for using it, and this is only for private sector industries, mostly used for adaptation planning, with some context of communicating risks, especially for the mining, quarrying, and transportation sectors, as well as raising awareness of climate risk within the water and electricity sector specifically, and which I found interesting, statutory reporting within the arts and entertainment, as well as accommodation and food sectors. what does this all mean? I've chatted and shared a lot of graphics to you, but what does it mean? So we were really interested in how organizations use climate and risk information in their response to physical risks and in taking adaptation action. And we found that of course, no one size fits all. There are noted subtleties across sectors, which mean understanding differences could help target effective messaging of risk information or climate information communication to organizations. There's a need to build support and awareness, specifically thinking about how we can move towards improved clarity and transparency of improved use, including where it can be found and how it can be used. Focus on hazards of most concern, perhaps consistent with CCRA4 and upcoming CCRA in communication campaigns. Strengthen and appeal to the economic bottom line. Openly discussing uncertainty and what this might imply for action. Respondents did mention, say what the effects will be, not what it might be. So thinking about how do we communicate this uncertainty more clearly. And also investing perhaps in adaptation and resilience towards improved climate information dissemination. Just as the next steps of what we're thinking about is finalizing this paper on informing adaptation, hopefully even repeating the survey if funding is necessary or possible, but also trying to connect this research to policy actions. Conversations and platforms such as this one is really helpful to us to learn more about how this information can be helpful, but also thinking about ways to better understand responses, options, and pathways. I think that's it from my end. I hope I didn't go too fast or too slowly, but thanking you all for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Denyse. That's absolutely fascinating and definitely a compliment to, I guess, complementary, sorry, to what we're going to hear next from Neha Mittal. Just in case you've missed it earlier on and joined a little bit later, we're going to have a Q&A after Neha Mittal presents her presentation. And yeah, so please think about your questions and put them in the Q&A button at the top there. So we're going to go straight to Dr. Neha Mittal. She's a senior climate service scientist at the Met Office. And her research focuses on improving the usability of climate science for adaptation decision-making and uses qualitative and participatory research methods. So over to you, Neha.
Thanks, Mai. I'll share my screen. Can you see it all right?
Yes, it's all good, and we can hear you too.
Thanks, Mai. Hello, everyone. It's great to get a chance to talk to you about some interesting work that we have been doing on engaging users of UKCP climate information. I have been working with Fai, Carol, and Jason over the last couple of years on user engagement in the UK. But of course, what I'm going to present today, it required contribution from several others in terms of design, development, and execution of some of the activities that are linked to this work. I know many of you have some understanding and experience of using UKCP and have engaged with us before, but since this is a public webinar, I thought I just wanted to quickly touch on what we offer in terms of UKCP 18. So there are UKCP web pages, UKCP user interface, CEDA archive, which form the key components of UKCP, and it includes the actual data as well as supporting resources. In terms of data, UKCP is provided for different data types, GIS layers, that is a new climate data portal that offers GIS layers. And it also provides files in form of NetCDF and information in graphs and spatial maps. To understand how to use the data, how to understand the data, there's of course guidance and support available in terms of guides, FAQs, e-learning, and they help you to understand the science behind the data, the limitations, the caveats around using the data, and to help you improve your use to use it effectively. And while this is a state-of-the-art approach to climate services globally, there's always scope for improvement and to continually improve climate services. Therefore, it's really essential for us to get feedback from users and understand how they use information, what works for them, and where improvements are desirable. So So as part of this strategy of continual improvement, we developed UKCP user consultation strategy in 2022 to inform the future of UK climate information. There were different modes of how we could go about engaging users, but today I'll focus mainly on user survey that we conducted last year. And specifically, the main objective of the survey was to understand the diversity in terms of users. What is the range of current use of UKCP, and understanding the user perceptions regarding usability and what is their preference for engagement with the Met Office. The online survey was designed by interdisciplinary team of scientists with inputs from academics in the field, and we included 35 closed and open-ended questions. In terms of data collection, we published the survey using social media channels, the Met Office social media channels, and we also got in touch with the registered users of UKCP. And apart from that, we relied heavily on Met Office colleagues who are involved in various networks and forums across different sectors. We received in total 380 responses to the survey. In terms of diversity, there are two pie charts here that indicate how diverse the sample of respondents was and the range of sectors they represented. The small inset numbers, they are the respondent numbers, and it just shows how users from mainly education and research, scientific and technical advisory services, and central government are kind of represented in large proportion compared to other sectors. But again, there are users from many other sectors ranging from civil society to finance to energy. But to complement the less represented sectors, I would like to focus your attention on the right-hand side pie chart, which is essentially the diversity shown by the work done under scientific and technical advisory services, which is represented mainly by consultancies. And they represent a lot of sectors, and including a lot of work under cross-cutting sectors. We also ask users to specify their regions of interest and operations, and the responses range from focus on devolved nations within the UK to international geographical scope. But majority of the responses were from England, where their operations are based in England and across the UK. In terms of their present use, we wanted to understand about two main aspects, starting with whether they use UKCP climate information and whether there are other sources they rely on in terms of using climate information. So the majority of respondents use UKCP, while 35 also use other information, and these include mainly the global climate datasets, Codex, CIMIP6, ICIMIP, and and others, they rely on secondary data sources to access climate risk data, like environmental agency, DEFRA, etc. And interestingly, there are 81 respondents who said they do not use UKCP. And some of them, they don't use UKCP directly, but they frequently discuss its applications, or they rely on resources that are related to UKCP, such as headline findings or science reports. But good chunk users of the respondents, they use UKCP. And we also wanted to understand where different users are in their journey of using climate information. So we provided them 3 options, but then they self-categorize themselves into 3 categories. The one is the self-sufficient, which is the respondents are aware of existing information and they know how to use it. And the intermediate category is about they're aware of existing risks and associated information, but not yet able to use information to full extent. And then the third category is around potential users, which is that they're not aware of the relevance of existing climate information for their decision-making and management of climate risks. And we wanted to understand how these categories are spread across different sectors. And that's the plot on the right, and it shows that these categories are spread across sectors quite evenly, except for self-sufficient user dominating quite predominant in the category of scientific and technical advisory services and education and research and energy. And potential users are spread out across different sectors, which perhaps suggests growing interest across sectors in engaging and using UKCP climate information. In terms of using different resources to improve their understanding, analysis, interpretation, and access of climate information, respondents use different, they rely on different resources. And the fact that all type of resources are used suggests that users consume information in different ways and have different preferences. So while some prefer headline findings or user interface and scientific reports, many of them heavily rely on technical notes, spreadsheets, fact sheets, and this essentially shows how it is important for us to cater to diverse users, because they have diverse needs and they have different diverse capabilities to understand and use information. Another aspect is around planning time horizon that we were interested in, given that UKCP climate information is available for multiple decades into the future. We wanted to get a sense of the spread of planning horizons for different users. Understanding this distribution is really important to understand how climate-related decisions and plans differ across users. So while some users, they require monthly to seasonal information, others require multi-decadal and sometimes even information beyond 2100. And almost, this bit is interesting, that almost 1 in 6 respondents did not specify a planning horizon. So there could be many reasons that they don't have different time horizons for different decisions, or maybe there's no consensus within their organization, or maybe the respondents are not decision makers themselves and not involved in decisions. The only thing we know from the data is that people who said they don't know, they mainly rely on short-term temporal scale for climate variables, and rarely use multi-decadal information. So, but how to interpret this information, I think this still requires some work. In a couple of instances, as exemplified by this quote, a single user may need different information for different time horizons. So in this code, they said our industry needs to consider 2 time horizons, a current 3 to 5 years at most, and 2050s. There's information for later, but not for the former. And maybe it's a good time for me to also indicate that in our analysis, responses to open-ended questions have been anonymized for ethical reasons, and we only try to use information and verbatim statements with reference to the sector, but not attributing them to particular organization or respondent. And in terms of their use, we used an open-ended question to understand how they are using information, and we used an existing topology to categorize the use. And there are 6 types, 6 categories in which we can categorize the use, from inform, understand, plan, to take action, communicate, and fund. I would not go into the details of it, but there are kind of very specific examples. And this question was responded by around 110 respondents out of 380. But this categorization essentially reveals that there's diversity in terms of purpose for which climate information is used, the dominance of sectoral risk analysis, and relatively limited use for communication, financing, and taking adaptation action, which I think echoes quite a lot that Denyse talked to us. Another open-ended question was around understanding the challenges. So it's always encouraging to see the diversity in terms of use of UKCP, but it is equally important for us to understand what kind of challenges users face while using this information. So there are 4 themes that emerge from these responses. The first one is around complexity. This includes difficulty in interpreting and using data, and difficulty in understanding uncertainties. And this quote, I think, reflects it really beautifully. It says, convey the degree of uncertainty and certainty, where the uncertainty lies and why, which is in itself is a very big question, and an interesting one as well. Another one is accessibility, which includes level of user friendliness of the interface, challenges in locating and extracting the data, and clarity about availability of relevant tools and data sets. And the other one is around specific data needs and the needs that are still unmet. And then the 4th one is around organizational issues. And again, this quote around there are challenges in how we integrate the data into our decision-making processes, and the lack of willingness to share data between different organizations. And they said they can go on and on about kind of organizational issues which are restricting them to use climate data effectively. In terms of specific data and tailored specific data or tailored data that respondents needed, there are many categories that emerge. I just want to highlight a few of them here. It's within extremes. There are requests about wind speed indicators, compound climate extremes, derived variables. They are heavily around hydrological information from, for example, for groundwater-related flooding, and for specific domains such as drainage engineering, marine variables. Respondents are interested in getting further information on ocean chemistry, for example, or wind and wave climate. Users they have specific needs around expansion of scenarios, so additional RCPs and additional global warming levels, and various time periods. And apart from climate data and variables, respondents also suggested additional tools similar to climate data portals, climate data portal, or something around threshold detectors to understand and use the data effectively. And there's also requests around improved standards and guidance for using climate data. Going to the last category around future engagement. In terms of future engagement, respondents showed interest across 3 options that we gave them. That is, either you become a member of the DAX, which is the Development and Knowledge Sharing Network, join the focus groups on specific topics, and be part of open forums such as interactive webinars. So we have already updated the DAX membership based on the responses last year. We have now around 60 organizations as part of our DAX network. The focus group were held last year and involved many of the respondents. And since then, we have expanded the scope of the webinars like this one from only DAX members to a wider audience, and including putting the recordings on YouTube. So this has been really great feedback for us to improve the way we have been engaging. And to finally sum up the talk, I would like to highlight that the ongoing user engagement has already helped us understand a great deal about users, their preferences, expectations from the UK Climate Service. And we received a great response to our survey and follow-up engagements where users have highlighted how they have used UKCP for taking various decisions. Importantly, they have provided us with information and suggestions for how we could further improve our services. So we plan to continue our engagement for users using different modes of communication, including maybe a potential survey next year that can build on existing engagement activities and on this survey as well. So in terms of what we are doing now, we have shared a report based on these findings with DEFRA, and we are having conversations about the appropriate next steps to improve climate information, its development and provision. And we are already following up with relevant stakeholders to further understand the decision context within which specific climate services could be co-developed. Overall, I think it's a really interesting and exciting time for us. And we would encourage you to be part of the engagement process. And we would really like to hear your feedback on UKCP climate information and related services. I'll stop here and look forward to your questions. Over to you, Fai.
Great, thank you, Neha. And yes, I guess we've heard from Denyse, who's kind of give that kind of broader adaptation perspective, I guess, but also thanks, Denyse, for actually focusing in on UKCP, so we can maybe get some questions which kind of relate the two in two talks in a way. But I know there are a few questions in the Q&A, but if it's okay, there's one thing that I maybe want to start off with, and then I'll go into the Q&A questions. And one thing that I was thinking of, Denyse, I was wondering about, because I guess the survey was primarily, or at least it seemed to be very focused on kind of adaptation rather than, say, what Neha has been doing is much more about the kind of climate data, I guess, or climate information. So, and you mentioned adaptation information, which could be quite broad, I guess. So I wondered whether you could maybe describe a little bit more about what you think people thought what that adaptation information is that they may or may not be engaging with.
You mean just adaptation information broadly, because I can't remember using the term adaptation information, but I think what we were trying to do was really just elicit views and perceptions of what adaptation means. I think that was such a central thing for us. We used the term so comfortably without really understanding what the context is, what is really a function or encompassing adaptation. So I think part of the findings that we had was, how do we build this awareness of adaptation? Maybe that's what you meant, adaptation information, as in what that refers to. How does it apply to your organization? What is that difference between adaptation and mitigation? Understanding that there is some overlap. There's been a lot of research recently about, there needs to be this merging of adaptation or integration of adaptation and mitigation factors. What is an adaptation strategy for some is actually a mitigation objective. So we really need to figure out what this means. But within that sort of discussion, understand what climate information data is needed to sort of build that understanding and foster evidence and support to move towards the best decision making possible. It's a very long-winded way of saying there's a lot more to be done, but I think conversations like this is quite helpful to bridge the gap and get the pieces together. A lot of what Neha mentioned in terms of users focus on UKCP 18 can definitely be combined and sort of contextualized with what organizations say, because I saw that you did have sectoral and industry sort of advice, and maybe we can have some refinements along those lines.
Great, thanks, Denyse. I will go to you now later, but I think just to go to the Q&A. So if you haven't already, please do put your questions in the Q&A part. So there's a button on your Teams portal. So please do add stuff there. I think there's one particular question I think directed to you, Denyse. I know you have replied already, but I think Anubhav was really talking about this kind of cross-sectoral. I wondered whether you could. He's replied to your a question for the context. I don't know if that's clearer to you as to what he's asking.
It is, and it's really an interesting question. And I saw Anubhav and also Helen McIntyre also chatted about this. I think the sort of caveat to the research that we did was just providing this overall diagnostic as to there are sectoral differences in terms of how people approach this, but we're not yet at that stage of understanding intersectoral collaboration, although it's very necessary. I agree with you that definitely some sectors may be more advanced, better equipped, and I know Helen is saying that we do see from a health perspective that things end up manifesting across other sectors. Grantham as a whole has been focusing a lot on the health perspective, thinking especially about heat risk. So we have been using this as sort of like a platform, or even just sort of a complementary focus in terms of our other work. But so I'd encourage you to reach out about this. But specifically, this research is really meant to just highlight the wide range of challenges and sort of diagnostics that we need to be thinking about.
Great, thank you, Denyse. Yes, I guess there's a lot that we still need to do. It's still in adaptation, mitigation, especially kind of understanding what people's experiences are right now. So thanks for that. I guess we've got a few questions from Brett, which are I guess directed at the Met Office. I was wondering, some of those are probably I can probably answer, I guess, but I wonder, Neha, I think there's something around kind of I guess the use of information, or I don't know if there's anything that you want to comment on. I don't know if you see his questions, but otherwise I can take up it on some of the more specific to data. Neha, can you hear me? Or you're probably just looking at them at the moment, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at them. I think
so. Maybe
more...
while you're looking at them, I can kind of have a go at particularly the one around granular data. So for Brett and others, I guess some decisions that were taken when the climate projections were being produced. So before 2018, which is about given the amount of supercomputer time that we had, what was the most, what would be best to run, and this is what we have now. So we do have multiple RCPs, including 8.5 and 2.6, if you know what those are, so like high emission as well as the low emission scenarios. But we also have middle ones as well, so like the ones which are in between for the probabilistic projections data. For the kind of the series of climate models that were run rather than using the probabilistic approach, yes, there were only a small number. Well, RCP, the high emission scenarios was the one that was ran for that, and that's generally because of being able to kind of run. Essentially, it was a decision about what we could run in the time that we have. I think just. And for the global model, there is the RCP 2.6, a low emission scenario, but only for that it was never downscaled to 12 kilometers, I think that you're saying. And a lot, and I guess your second question is related to that in terms of the global warming levels, which we do know the Climate Change Committee is using for its climate change risk assessment, and we have been working with them to work out or to help provide some guidance, which is imminent. There is something coming soon, so do watch your inboxes about trying to explain how those emission scenarios relate to global warming levels. I think there were a few other questions.
Maybe if I can add, Fai, on the last point. Two things. I think we have heard the same sentiments about global warming levels and how people should understand and interpret it. So we are definitely, as Fai said, working on it. And the second point around how to use that information for local authorities, just to flag that is we are going to announce and open the local authority climate service data tool next month. So that might really help you to dig deep into how to use climate information for local authorities. So just to flag that. Is there
maybe just one last point, because I think Brett uses the word granularity quite a bit. On the satellite data, Brett, I don't think I have the expertise or the knowledge about answering that. So maybe that's something that we can follow up afterwards. But in terms of kind of granularity, and I guess particularly, I think you talk about cities and having that kind of high resolution data. I guess that's always going to be one of those areas where the limits of computing power, but also I think a wider question of whether climate models are in fact needed to really get to that kind of very kind of building resolution, and whether that's an appropriate way of kind of using climate models, but maybe there are other methods to try and really understand and provide the information to really understand that. I think that that question is being looked at by researchers at the moment, but obviously you need the information now. But I guess it's about that kind of balance between what is suitable for decision making, I guess, as opposed to just having data for risk assessment. So I think there's probably quite a debate that's still required in that arena. Hopefully that answers some of your questions, Brett. They're very we'll come back to us if it doesn't. I wondered whether there's any other questions that other people might have. Then please do put them in the Q&A. But while people are thinking and digesting, I guess I've got another one which is around maybe I guess I was just thinking kind of the links between what you've presented, Neha, and what you have, Denyse, and I think there's something around this I guess, Denyse, you came. I'm going to have to terribly paraphrase a little bit, but I think you were mentioning about those who are probably not as engaged, or at least I don't think it's their responsibility, or it's not within their remit, versus the kind of, and I wondered the links between that to those who probably want to do more informal kind of informal engagement with their colleagues, and then linking that maybe to kind of Neha's kind of first survey about actually those who may not use UKCP or that kind of detailed data. I don't know if you can both reflect a little bit on the potential links there, or maybe not, no links. Maybe I'll go to Denyse first and then we'll go to Neha.
I think it's I think when our data set is so rich that we're constantly finding new linkages and new sort of interactions between some of these questions. So I didn't think about it before, but it's something that we can explore, thinking about whether people who have said this is not a priority for me are the same ones, or what are their reflections on using UKCP 18 or using any other climate information source. It's something certainly that we can look into to get that reflection. But it is quite fascinating that there's quite a high number of respondents that say it's just not a priority for my organization, or I think also complacency and staff attitudes about climate change. There's a lot of interactions and follow-up research that we can do, analysis.
I am going to go to Neha, and then Mohammed has a question, which I think was answered, but I'll pose it again. But Neha.
So I think it was interesting for me to see that there is no set pattern here. I mean, if you look at respondents who said they do not use UKCP, they are not respondents who come from the potential user category. So even the people who are not using UKCP, it's a great mix of intermediate, self-sufficient, and potential users. And they don't use UKCP mainly because they are relying more on derived products. They're relying on other organizations to do some analysis for them. And those organizations might be using UKCP, but they are not directly using UKCP. And in terms of kind of use reflection on how they are using information, it's also a very mixed bag. So in terms of communication, there are potential users who are using some sort of headline messaging or something, or scientific reports to communicate it to others. So I think there's no kind of pattern here.
Okay, so thanks, Neha, and thanks for both of you trying to draw those links. We do, Mohammed, I hope that your question has been answered. If you could, as Sadali said. So I'm going to go to Mike, something that I certainly was thinking as well. So this is about how many surveys have been issued and whether you are able to kind of track that changing, especially, I guess, Prepare has, as you say, has been done several times. And I just wondered whether there's a comment about how action has changed since the first one.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. And just to Mohammed, I'm not sure if you saw my response. We did include the transportation sector within the private sector subset category. So we did include the transportation sector within that as an industry. So Michael, thanks. There were 3 Prepare surveys, one done in 2009, one done in 2012, and then ours done in 2021. The challenge of or sort of automatic comparison is hard because they're different makeups. So we're trying to be purist in the statistical way of actually comparing across time. However, we can see that you do have some changes across time in terms of climate action. People do feel a lot more, that they're more aware of it, but in terms of the type of awareness or how they respond to it has been shifted slightly. Ours was a bit skewed because we did do it at the height of the pandemic. Which I think sort of skewed thoughts in terms of its priority or its confirmation of an issue compared to other issues. But we did have a Prepare report, headline policy findings, which did go into that. I'm happy to share it in the chat with you as a link, and it's on the Grantham website. In terms of thinking ahead, this is exactly what we want to do, kind of keep and continue to do these surveys so we can see some longitudinal analysis of whether there has been change and in what direction, to understand, especially on the adaptation side, but also on the climate information use and decision-making side.
Great, thank you, Denyse. And I think Neha also mentioned that in her final slide about thinking about these kind of longitudinal surveys, which help us track that, hopefully track that that change in action. I think we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to have one final question. So I know Brett has also commented again, but we do have someone else. So we've got Giles Little. So are there any plans for linking climate projections with the most effective adaptation mitigation measures that could be taken by the major user types? So he's from a local authority. That feels like it's more of a question of less about what we're going to, what the surveys are about necessarily, but more kind of what the research and community or the those who are doing work on kind of assessing adaptation mitigation measures. That's something I guess we could probably explore another time. I know there are definitely in the academic community, people are looking into this, as well as various engineering consultancies that I've certainly come across who are certainly looking into doing this for particular, not necessarily major user types, but I guess it's for their particular clients. And it is quite often quite specific. But I guess you're coming from a local authority perspective, so I assume you're thinking about kind of those kind of categories of mitigation and adaptation measures, which might apply to all local authorities. I guess that's something that sorry, I'm a very long answer to not really give an answer, but hopefully that's something that we can maybe ask others who do work in this space to try and maybe help answer that question. But I think for today, but maybe for these talks, it's not necessarily about them, but certainly Giles, we will get in touch. But unless Neha, Denyse, you've got something to add about that on that question. No, I see some shaking of heads. So Giles, we will come back to that. We do have so in the final minute, we'll share as Denyse said, we alongside the YouTube video, we can share and the links that Denyse and Neha may want to share with you, so like alongside that kind of policy briefing that you mentioned. So we'll do that alongside the video. Thanks again for your time today to listen in. And next time we have Tarina Plowright from the Greening Campaign and John Tinker from the Met Office. And yeah, please join us on the 24th of October for that. And just one last plea again at the end is that the set of webinars are definitely they continue with your help and your contribution. So please do consider contributing and presenting, and do get in touch with us and chat about it if you wish. Thank you again, and thank you to the speakers. So clap to you, and see you next time.